the Aristocrats Soccer Podcast, the elite soccer podcast in all of soccer podcasting and podcasting in general. I am co-host David Harris here with Jake Keegan. Jake, how are you doing?
I'm excellent tonight, Dave. This is a late episode for us. This is almost 8:30 at night, way past my bedtime.
Way past your bedtime. But we have to do it because it's an extra elite special episode of the Aristocrats Soccer Podcast. We're doing a retrospective / interview on you.
Yes, this is the most nervous I've been for any of these podcasts. I am
really.
Well, not really, but I was trying to build this.
Which podcast were you most nervous about?
That's a good question. I would say probably just the first one, Matt Hedges. But after that,
that was good one.
Yeah, I don't think I've been nervous for anyone after that. It was just the first one because I didn't really know how to do it, and now I feel confident doing them. So.
Yeah, no, it's been a lot of, we haven't really done the recap thing lately, but but we've been on quite a run with a lot of great guests. Like, what do you think so far? What have you enjoyed? Some of the things you enjoyed the most?
I would say probably the episodes with guests that I know have been really fun, like Mojo, Dallas and Caesar, Vinny, the one we just released. Those have been really interesting, just because Bruno and Alan too. Yeah, like guys that I know, because they're sharing stories, and then I'm kind of reliving them through them, and also hearing new bits and pieces that I didn't know before. There's so many stories out there, but all the guests have been great, so it's tough to just pick one or two.
But I think for me, the Paul Bravo episode was I haven't felt. Everyone's been a great episode. Personally, it's been a lot of fun, nice people. But Paul was just so easy. It was press record, maybe throw out a little direction, and then just let him go. Which is why I do want to get him back on at some point. Hopefully, maybe December or January or something. But I think he's got a lot more stories. But he was just so open and great stories. But
he did probably have the best stories. That Ronaldo story that he told, some of the other Beckham stories, even the stories of his pre-MLS days where he's just playing for with Greek Americans. There's so many good stories that he had. Those stories. So we've had a lot of good guests. We're going to have a lot more because this is the elite. As you keep going,
we're only getting going.
Should we get going tonight?
Tonight is our featured guest, but we actually wanted to do this in the beginning for everybody out there, but we kind of kicked off the show, I guess, with a little bit. I guess the first episode was going to be both of us, and it kind of maybe became a little more about me because I talk so much, and but you're pretty good at talking too, but. We really wanted to hit on your career, and we figured we'd do that early on, but then we've gotten such good feedback and responses and people making themselves available that, now we thought it would be a good time, with the season being done and everything too for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just a chance to kind of reflect back and then we'll figure out maybe later on down the road the next steps. But let's start off with let's start from the very beginning. Let's start with youth soccer. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
So I was maybe 5 years old, really, when I started playing, and my parents got me into it. My dad played college soccer at UC Davis, actually.
Oh,
so they were I believe they were Division II at the time, but he was still a very good player. And one of his best friends, and the best man at his wedding, also played. He was a keeper at UC Davis. My dad was a center back. So the two of them and the other guy, Keith Comfort, they were both around my life a lot in the youth game.
Right.
They helped me so much. I remember we would have soccer tennis games till it got dark. And when I was 8, 9, 10, 11, they would beat me. And finally I got to a point where, whatever it was, 13, 14, that I would start beating them. And from that point on, they haven't been able to recover. They've gotten older, and it's the way it goes. But those kind of memories from youth soccer, and it's those key moments in your development where you just you're with the ball all the time. And not that I'm the cleanest technical player in the world, but I think those kind of experiences off the field. I remember having we had a juggling competition with our team, our East Fishkill Thunder youth team, and we had to record our high juggle for the week. And me and another guy would always go back and forth, and it was just that friendly competition off the field that I think helped me have success on the field. And when I was 8 years old when I started playing for the East Fishkill Thunder, was my youth team, and I was with them from 8 until 19. I was with them the whole way. At the beginning, it was just East Fishkill kids, and then gradually we got a few out from maybe 30 minutes away, then we got a few from an hour away. We just kept getting better and better, and finally, when we were 18, we won State Cup, we won the Region 1 title, and then we finished third at Nationals. At Nationals, we played against a bunch of future MLS players, Danny Mwanga, who was the #1 pick, Eric Hurtado, Enzo Martinez, Alex Martinez, guys like that. And that was kind of how it capped off my youth career. But that team that we had was a lot of good players at the end. When we were 18, we had recruited a lot, and just over the years gradually got a little bit better. But it turned out we only had 2 guys who ever played a Division I game. And we had a lot of really good players. We had I think 4 or 5 that went to Oneonta, played in the Final Four in Division III. But we were kind of that small town club. And when we won regionals and State Cup and all that, we would be going up against these teams that had 10 Division I recruits. And then we were just kind of this small town, like Bad News Bears. And it's something that I always will look back on with pride, because I feel like it's something that my dad was the coach from under 8. I was always playing, and it's something that we built kind of as a family. And we had a few guys that were with us from day one, and one of them was Kevin Bunce, who actually he also was the other guy who went to Binghamton with me. So that kind of youth career that I had, I played at John Jay High School as well. It really set me up, and it created kind of the person and the player that I would later become.
So you played for your dad pretty much, throughout the youth?
Yeah, my dad was the head coach until we were maybe 14 or 15. And then we got Toma was a head coach for 2 years, and my dad was the assistant. And then we got Eddie Evans, became the head coach. My dad was still always the assistant. He coached us the season that we went on that long run. So. Okay.
So you had a bit of it, but you also played a bit with FC Westchester too, or?
Oh, you've done your research, Dave. I'm impressed.
Well, you told me.
Did I tell you that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah, because we were talking about Tommy Mack. So so in the summers, or I guess it was summers and maybe beginning of spring or end of spring, I would play for FC Western in what was the Super Y League at the time. I don't know if they still have it around. So the East Fishkill team we didn't have a Super Y team. So I would still be playing with the East Fishkill team year round, but then I'd also go and play with FC Westchester. And FC Westchester was a very good team at the time. They were the team that one of them that we were competing with for state cups. And they had a lot of good players. One of them was Tommy McNamara, who's had an extensive MLS career. And at one point, I was with their Super Y, and they were trying to get me to come for their normal year-round team as well.
The academy,
it wasn't academy yet, because it was still state cup, because academy only came around when I was a junior in high school. So I never even had that option, really. I mean, I guess for the last 2 years I could have done it, and for my age group, it was always USU soccer. So we'd play state cup, we do Region 1 leagues, but there was no academy system. It was just and Super Y, of course, but that was really it. You didn't have that option, and I don't know what I would have chose if it was around when I was playing.
It would have been hard to turn down the academy, I think.
I know, especially the way it is today, with that's how all the big recruiting comes. But it's also kind of sad in a way, because I feel so many of my good memories playing come from playing in high school, playing youth and playing with this youth team that I played with since I was 8 years old. So I'm sure I would have created different memories, but it's something that I'm kind of happy didn't happen for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, regardless, anyway, it led to some really great experiences, and then, it still helped you to develop into the player you become. Why don't you talk a little bit about the college recruiting process? That was a bit of an experience for you, but ultimately led you to Binghamton?
Yeah, so I was small. I mean, I still am small, but I didn't kind of become the height and weight that I am today until I was at least a senior. So when I was maybe a junior, sophomore, I was still a good player, but I remember vividly, we had this college recruiting like expert come to our house and advise us, or was it my parents hired him and just advise me on like what we should do, like what our options are, this and that. And he was like, "What do you want to do? Like, what are your goals?" And I was like, "Well, I want to play Division One." This is when I was a junior, and he's like, "I think it would be tough for you to be a successful Division One player. I really think you should look into playing Division Three." And at that time, I was like, "Geez, that's tough to hear." Because that was not what I wanted to do. And I mean, I also remember like Jeff Mateo, he went to my high school and he was coaching at St. John's at the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was 20. No, he graduated like maybe 10 years before me. Same high school.
I went to high school. Okay, I didn't realize
we both went to John Jay High School. He lived actually. His parents still live just on the same road that my parents live on.
Okay.
Like 10 houses down. And he grew up there, and he was a legend at John Jay.
Yeah.
So I was always like, St. John's was one of the schools that I was like, I kind of want to go there. Like, really good. I had been to games at Belson. Like, I just remember like you're in the park, like where you park is below the field, and you can feel the electricity and all that. And when we were juniors, because he went to Jay, he invited maybe like 4 or 5 of the John Jay players at the time to come to a game, like an unofficial recruiting visit, basically.
Right.
And at that time I wanted to go, but there was never any interest at all, like literally zero. So I mean that wasn't an option from St. John's, yeah. And so I just went through the process, and I didn't have a ton of interest. I had like Colgate was interested, Binghamton was interested, and then Harvard were the 3 schools that were interested in me. And Harvard was not really an option because my SAT scores were not quite up to par.
Wow.
So it was really Colgate or Binghamton. And then Colgate kind of became less interested. So it really became just Binghamton, like kind of against themselves. And that year I played for the Empire State Hudson Valley team, and it was at Binghamton. Okay. And we won the gold medal. I scored 2 goals in the final, and all the Binghamton coaches were obviously there. And then like 5 days after that, I got a scholarship offer to go to Binghamton. And this is right before my senior year. So at that time I was like, I have like no one else is really a legitimate offer. Yeah, I'd love to go to Binghamton. Binghamton was a great academic school. They were very good at the time, soccer wise. And I made that decision pretty early. And then kind of that fall is when I really took off as a player, like between high school, between youth, and I started scoring tons of goals. And like that kind of fall, I got a lot more offers.
Oh, really?
Even better offers, like full rides and this and that. But
really,
I stayed loyal to Binghamton, and I decided to stay. Like I gave my word that I was going to go to Binghamton, and that's what I did. I went to Binghamton. And
which schools came into the picture then?
I believe it was like Albany. Definitely, they offered me a full scholarship.
Oh wow!
I think Rutgers was one as well. There were a bunch of Division threes, but I'm trying to remember what the other Division ones were. Yeah, I'm trying to remember the other Division ones. I'm sure there were a couple more, but
St. John's?
No, St. John's did not have my number. But it's
Jeff did, but not Mazer.
Not Mazer. No, he was not interested. No, thank you.
No. He's done well again, but
Oh no, I have no like qualms about it. I think I've always been someone who kind of bloomed late in a sense, where it took me time to improve. Like I don't feel like at any level I was the best player starting off. Like I didn't have that raw ability, but I just kind of worked my way. And like I feel like in high school my senior year was the best. I feel like in college my senior year was the best. And I feel like that's the kind of player I've always been.
Yeah. Which means we've got some pretty interesting things ahead of us in the next few years.
I don't know. My senior year might have already passed. in the professional game, sadly. I might be a super senior, super
You're
duper
30.
senior.
You're actually in your prime.
Oh, okay. That's good.
Yeah, well, 30's your prime, so.
A couple more years.
So
Couple more
that's
years in my prime.
What's that?
I said a couple more years in my prime then.
Oh, easily, yeah. All right, so you're at Binghamton. Let's talk a little bit about the whole college experience. You know, the real highlights.
The real highlights. So Binghamton was an experience. It was when I first came in, we were really good. My freshman year was probably the best team we had. We should have been better. We actually lost in the America East playoffs when our captain got red carded, and then we ended up losing the game, which was unfortunate. And then that spring,
Who did you lose the game to?
We lost to UMBC.
Okay.
Yeah, they had like Andrew Bowles and Levy Hawapu, whatever say his name. I mean, they were a good team, but the week before that, we beat them 4-0. It was at home. Like we should have won the game, and it's just
UMBC.
UMBC, yeah.
Yeah, so like you're probably talking about guys that would have been like Baltimore Bohemians.
Yes.
You know, like a lot of players from that school. You know, especially I know like probably like when Pete Caringi.
Pete Caringi was a year behind me. So the first year he wasn't on the team, but in 2010 he came. So yeah, I had a good year my freshman year. I was the top goal scorer on the team, and we're just really happy with the program, and everything was going great. And then John Scott, who was our assistant coach and did most of the recruiting, he left the spring of my freshman year to take a job at Hartwick.
Okay.
And that kind of honestly just blew up the program. Looking back on it now, he took maybe 4 or 5 guys with him to Hartwick, and they were all from my class or the class above me, so the sophomore class. So they're all younger players.
Okay.
My class was very good when we first came in. I think it was 12 players, and I think at least 10 of them could have been starters eventually. And so we took 4 of them, a couple other transferred, and by the end of it, we were down to like 13 players in the spring. And it wasn't even like the 13 best players. It was just, it was a mishmash of group. And then they had to hurry and get more numbers in for the following fall for the season. And the recruitment it was rushed. It wasn't good. We had some just terrible players come in. Some decent ones. It wasn't all bad. But we just, from like that sophomore and junior year, we were not very good. And
did any of the guys that you took, were they guys that would be like playing PDL or anything like that?
Yeah. Like they took at least one. There was one that was played for the Rough Riders, Adam Weinzimmer. They had a couple English guys, Greg Mathers, Robertson, Tyler Bailey.
Left back.
Yeah, he's a left back. Yeah, he actually is. Tyler Bailey, yeah, I'm trying to remember who else. Joel Collins left. Like a lot of guys that I thought like we could be good with these guys, and it's unfortunate because I still talk to the head coach Paul Marco. He's still there. He's been great for my career. He's really helped me, and he's been a big supporter of mine. Right.
Oh yeah.
A huge supporter of mine. So it's just unfortunate that the dynamic of the program changed. I think him and John Scott were a great partnership together. And when John left, I don't think John ever really achieved the same success. He did have some success at Hartwick, and I don't think Paul has achieved the same success either. So together they were better than apart. And I just think obviously John Scott is a great coach, or he was a great assistant coach, especially from my experience. And when you're that good, you want to be a head coach. I mean, that's just natural.
Hartwick went from D1 to D3 pretty,
Yeah, I think he was D1 at least for like 4 years. So he had some time. But it's just one of those things that the program it was so good. They went to 6 straight America East finals. They won 2 of them. And then that spring of my freshman year, it just kind of all went downhill. And I thought we kind of started bringing it back up a little bit my senior year. I thought that was probably the second best team that I played on, but we didn't have a backup goalkeeper. So when in the first game, our keeper, I think he tore his hip labrum or something like that. And he was out basically for the season. And we had 2 freshmen come in who were just not up for it at all. So we just ended up, in the America East tournament that year, we ended up losing. We were up 4-2 with 10 minutes left, and we lost 5-4 in overtime. And it was one of those seasons like that. That game summed up the season. We had that team had Leo Fernandez, who he played with the Union and all that. But that game just kind of summed up our season. Our keeper was asked. We were up 4-3 with a minute left, and the keeper is like panicking. This freshman keeper, he's asking to come out of the game. And then it's 4-4 going into extra time, and he's on the sideline in tears because he's so nervous. Like you feel bad for the kid because he's so nervous and he just can't handle the moment. But that kind of goes back to the whole recruiting thing. Like if you don't recruit well in college soccer, you're not going to be good, no matter how good the coach is.
But you still had some guys like Trey, Tommy, maybe some others that played PDL, and guys that like maybe let's transition a little bit to the PDL since it kind of complements the same time. Like, so you had some Binghamton guys like that, and I think a couple of them ended up at Western Mass, right? And you tried to head over there too.
Yeah. So there was Trey Jasinski and Austin Hughes and Tommy Klim and myself. I think we had already told this story in the first episode. We had all did we tell this story?
No,
we didn't. Okay. So we all go to Western Mass, PDL this is between my sophomore and junior year, we all go to Western Mass for a tryout, and it's a 2-day tryout, like invite tryout. We're all trying to get on the PDL team, and I thought I played well. I thought we all did well. But then that next week they come back to us and they're like, so they took Trey and Austin, but they didn't take me and Tommy. And it was at that moment I was like, geez Louise, because at Binghamton, I was the main guy, or one of the main players. And I knew that I had to play PDL in order to kind of advance my career forward. But I wasn't getting looks from anyone else. Western Mass was kind of the only option at the time. And then I was left with nothing. And I was really down at the time. I was really kind of doubting what my future could be after Binghamton.
Right.
Even definitely I didn't have, I had aspirations, but I didn't really believe them fully, because I was just like, if I'm not good enough. The previous year, my sophomore year, I scored 3 goals in college. I couldn't find a PDL team. I'm like, am I good enough? If I'm not good enough in college, so how can I be good enough at the professional level? And that was kind of deep down, that's what I was thinking. And it took a lucky break, thanks to a club that we've both been heavily involved with. We joke about the Westchester Flames, but that was such a turning point in my career. I don't know where I would be without that experience. Like just going to a completely open tryout, paying for it.
You actually paid for that?
I'm pretty sure I paid for it. I know it was completely open because the players there were terrible, so it couldn't have been an invite tryout. I'm pretty sure I paid for it. I don't remember.
Gus always was like, he never wanted to charge for the tryouts, I thought.
Okay, and maybe I didn't pay for it, but it was definitely completely open. Yeah. And I remember getting there like an hour before.
Yeah, it would be completely open though, and to the point of ridiculous.
And I remember getting there an hour before and thinking like I would warm up, be one of the first ones there, like make a good impression type thing. And the gates were closed. So I was just sitting in the parking lot waiting, and then eventually people started coming, and then I had to sit out because there were probably 50, 60 players, and then I had to sit out, and then I was watching it, and I was like, you gotta be kidding me. This is like, I'm going to go play for this team.
Yeah.
But then eventually I got on the field for maybe 5-10 minutes. Gus was impressed, and then I ended up signing with them. And I still didn't really expect it to be a great situation for me because I was looking at the open tryout, just didn't see professional, didn't see anything. And then
you had a lot of foresight.
Yeah. That's true. I was right about some things, but for me, for whatever reason, it worked out perfectly. Like, what ended up happening was Tommy Clem, who was also cut by Western Mass, he came and lived with me that summer. And at the time, at Binghamton, we did a bit of kind of strength and conditioning type work, but not as much as we should have, not by any means. And when we would do it, it'd just be like bench and squat. It was just like very basic, like kind of like baseball workouts. And so I had really no experience in weightlifting. And here's someone that I'm not big now. So, I mean, I need to lift weights, or I'm even smaller than I am now. And I need to lift them properly. And I didn't get that experience my first 2 years at Binghamton. And I think I think having Tommy living with me helped me so much, because he had a rough idea of what to do. He wasn't an expert, but he was just as hard of a worker as me. He really, we got a gym membership right away. He took me to the gym, and then like once he kind of showed me a little bit of the ropes, I took it from there, and we kind of pushed each other, and it was a really good situation for me anyway. I mean, for him, I think it was good as well for him. But so he was living with me or with my parents for like the first month and a half of the season, and then he got in an argument with Gus.
Shocker.
Shocker. So Gus actually.
Everybody gets into an argument with Gus.
So he would announce the 18 that are going to dress before, and Gus would tell the players to come to the game and whatever. Yeah. And so we showed up to the game, and Gus tells Tommy before the game, like right before, after he had driven there and everything, he's like, "Listen, sorry, I miscounted. You're not even on the bench. You can't play at all." And Tommy was just like, he was pissed, and just, at that time, there was only a few weeks left in the season, so he left. And it's typical Westchester Flames, but at the same time, like, the first game I went to, I was still at Binghamton, so I just drove there. I was in Jersey, scored 2 goals. We won 3-0. And then I was like, oh wow, this is like, I scored 3 goals all year at Binghamton. I already scored 2 here, and this is kind of almost a better level in some. PDL could be argued as a better level. It's just not taken as seriously.
Right.
Like, the level of player is very high, and then from there I just kept scoring.
It's soccer, and sometimes guys aren't too motivated.
Yeah, but I just kept scoring, and I ended up winning the Golden Boot, like Rookie of the Year, like all league, all the accomplishments that I could have gotten kind of happened for me. And it was in that moment, because of the PDL, is you have so many ex-pros, you have so many high-level college guys, you have like just so many players in the group that you look at their CV or whatever, and you're like, holy crap, like, this guy's good. Like Jared LaVenture, he was MLS for whatever. He was at Jersey Express, MLS Goal of the Year. You have a lot of other guys that were Matt Herman Trophy watch list players. You had all these guys, and I looked around the league, and especially in our conference, and I was like, I can be at that level. I can be at this guy's level. And I think a lot of guys get that moment when they go in academy, over in England. They get that moment when they get to train with the first team for the first time.
Right.
But for me, I was 20 probably 20 at that time. And that was my moment, playing in PDL, playing against all these guys. I was like, I can play at that level. I can play at the professional level, and I can have success. So that was that summer that kind of gave me that belief. Whereas only 3-4 months earlier, I was like, I guess I better look for real, like what I'm going to do after Binghamton type thing, in terms of like a real life, real job situation. What am I going to do after this? So
did you get to play with Ricardo, our friend Ricardo Maxwell Ordain? Like, do you remember playing with him much? Like, and did you realize that he had played professionally and actually won USL?
Yes, I did. He was another guy. Yeah, he was. Who was he with? Charleston Battery?
Charlotte Eagles.
Charlotte Eagles. So yeah, I knew that, and I remember training with him. I remember looking him up as well, and he was a bit older at the time, but when he would mostly come on as a sub, as a left winger. And he had the longest legs.
Yeah.
He was so quick, and I enjoyed playing with him. He couldn't play 90 minutes week in, week out, but I really enjoyed playing with him. And he was another guy that he had a lot of good advice and insight, just because, and he had my respect, because at that time I was looking up to these ex-pros like they were gods.
Yeah.
And he fell into that category for sure.
Oh yeah, Ricardo actually, if things have fallen a little bit differently, he's a friend, but also I think not in all honesty, from what everybody else told me, like I think he could have done a bit more in the professional game, but kind of went more for got married and kids, and opted to kind of like get a job, and like I don't think MLS was an option for him at that point. So it was more
Yeah.
But anyway, so you had that great year with the Flames, and then you went back again the following year, and it wasn't quite as good. But then it led you to the next step of the Jersey Express, and maybe just go through that a little bit, and just a few of the stories of the characters that you meet along the way.
You want me to introduce Golly to the story?
I guess.
Reluctantly. All right, so Golly. So I was with the Flames for I think like the first 12 games of that 2012 PDL season, and I actually think I scored a decent amount of goals, but we only won 1 or 2 games. The year before, we were like 500. We had finished just one place behind or out of the playoffs, so we were decent. And then that next year, we were terrible. And then with a few games left, Golly calls me up, he was the general manager of the Jersey Express at the time. He's like, we want you to come. And at that same time, actually, Brendan Burke, who was the Reading coach, also wanted me to come for the last like month of the season. So I actually had to make a decision who I was going to go.
Which, not to cut into your story, but I mean, for, Golly was one thing because it was fairly common for him to take players that from Westchester, that were good players and bring them into Jersey, which, they were spending some money on some, the ex-pros, whatever. But for Reading, we're talking about now the PDL affiliate of the Philadelphia Union. Coach, Brendan Burke would be in that system. So you're getting some recognition there that they want to at least give you a look for the professional level. So.
Yeah. I mean, looking back, I should have gone to Reading. I mean, maybe not actually, because it worked out. We'll find out later in the story. But I decided to go with the Jersey Express. I spent the last 4 games there, and we ended up losing in extra time in the playoffs to Reading. So, I mean, but the Jersey Express was a big step up in terms of training level. We trained almost every day. There was a lot of ex-pros, like you mentioned. It was like a Russian. Jeff? No, it wasn't Jeff. Jeff was the following year. It was some like Russian guy. Forgot his name.
Oh, yeah. I remember him, yeah.
I forgot his name.
I forgot the name too, but I remember who you're talking. Yeah.
But I was only there. I only played 4 games for them, 3 in the regular season and then the playoff game. But then flash forward. So I had my senior year at Binghamton after the PDL. And then in November, December, Golly reaches out to me again. Golly took a liking to me even for those like 3-4 games. He seemed to like me. And he reached out to me in November being like, I have a game for like the Jersey Express. We're organizing a game against Maccabi Haifa, which is, for those who don't know, Maccabi Haifa is, at the time, they were the biggest club in Israel. They've fallen off a bit, but they're still in the top 3 or 4 for sure. And he's like, we're setting up a game, Jersey Express against Maccabi Haifa under 23s. It wasn't the first team, but under 23s. So I was like, okay, great. Like, that's cool. Like, it's an opportunity in front of professional scouts. That's kind of how I looked at it. And the game was played, it was before Christmas. I want to say like December 15th, something along those lines. And I get to the game, and I go to the Jersey Express locker room, and Golly's like, hey, you're not in here. You're in there, which was with the Maccabi Haifa players. And I was like, this is weird, but I mean, okay, like I'll go play with them. So I just went over, changed, I put on whatever Maccabi Haifa gear, and I go out, warm up with them, play the game. It was me and Noah Sadawi.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know that name. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. But he's still playing. He played with them that night, and he's still over playing in Africa. He's had like maybe
South Africa or something, maybe?
South Africa. He's played in some top leagues in the Middle East and also in Africa.
Yeah.
And so we both played that night, and we both actually scored for Maccabi Haifa against Jersey Express. We won the game 3-2. Like, I mean, it went reasonably well. But, I mean, I didn't think too much of it. I was just like, all right, that was a cool experience. I mean, let's kind of move on. Let's see what else we have. And at that time,
and at this point, you were done with Binghamton.
So
your eligibility was finished. So you could play in the game. And then also, so this is December, during your senior year, for the MLS draft, and also, it's kind of like an under the radar type of experience. Like, not a lot of it wouldn't have been publicized. A lot of people wouldn't have known about it. Like, it wouldn't have been something that would have been reported on. So, people wouldn't have known. But it's not that like it's a secret. It just wasn't a huge thing of event. It was sort of like a friend, not a friendly meet, but an exhibition and just a chance for them to try.
Yeah, it was real under the radar. The only camera there was actually my mom. She filmed it. So I had video of the game. I had video of the game, which is kind of cool.
Okay.
But
maybe Noah Dewey or whatever would like to get the
video. No, maybe. But anyway, like we left there. I didn't think much of it. I was like, that was cool, but like I'll just move on and like try to get. I knew I was trying to play professionally. I had graduated Binghamton in 3.5 years, so one semester early, because I knew I wanted to pursue.
We need video. We need video of the goals for like the YouTube page.
Okay. I definitely have video of my goal. I'll try to get other ones. We'll get the highlights up or whatever.
No, it's just your goal. That's all we need. We don't need anybody else's.
Okay. I'll get that to you. Yeah, I'll get that to you.
Yeah. One day when we're doing Patreon and there's people paying,
when we start having ads and all that.
Exactly.
But yeah, at that same time, I'm gonna forget his name. I feel bad forgetting his name. Who's the guy at the Westchester Flames who's the agent, Portuguese agent?
Oh, Jose.
Jose. I'm sorry, Jose, if you're listening to this. He's a good guy. I can't believe I forgot his name. But Jose at this same time, he is embarrassed. Yeah. He is. He was an agent or acting as an agent. I think he was an agent officially, and he wanted to try to get me over to Portugal.
Oh, he was an agent.
He was a real agent. Yeah, he was trying to get me over to Portugal.
He represented
Mike DeFont.
He represented Mike DeFont too.
Yes.
I got into the Red Bull later on.
Yeah.
So he very much was a registered agent with USSF and had other clients. So or had clients. So
Okay. Yeah. So Jose at the same time is like, let me get you over to Portugal, and I was definitely interested, but I was just trying to figure out what the best situation was. And maybe a week after that game, Gali calls me. And he's like, Maccabi Haifa want you over on trial. So this is right around Christmas of 2012. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, wow, that's awesome. Let's get me over. Like, whenever you want. Let's see. Let's go over and let's see what it's like. I knew this was a big club. I didn't know. I think when you're in college and you're in the PDL, you don't quite understand the jump of MLS or of Maccabi Haifa or like of top clubs. Just being that I never trained with them. But I was obviously really excited for that opportunity. But what happened was Gali was, I don't know exactly what was happening. Maybe it was shady, maybe it wasn't. But it ended up, so he said that Maccabi Haifa wanted me to get a work permit before I went over. Because if they ended up signing me, they didn't want me to have to leave the country and then come back again. Which may make sense. Right. I don't know if that's legal, but that's what happened. So I had to wait until I get this work permit. And I didn't get the work permit to officially go over until middle of January, maybe even towards the 20th of January. And during this time, I'm telling Jose I'm going to pursue this Maccabi Haifa opportunity. So Portugal's kind of out the window for now. And I'm going to go over, whatever. But the MLS draft is like January 22nd, we'll say, or whatever the day was. And I didn't expect to be drafted. I was like, I had a decent year at Binghamton, like all region. Like I scored a decent amount of goals at Binghamton, but we weren't a great team. We didn't make the NCAA tournament. I knew I was good in the PDL, and Reading obviously took an interest in me, which is Philadelphia Union's affiliate, but I still didn't expect to be drafted. I thought there were more good players out there. I just wouldn't have been included, and Maccabi Haifa was my route. But then I think my flight was scheduled for like the 26th. And then it was already scheduled. And then on the 22nd, I get drafted by the Union. And I'm like, wow, this is awesome. Like, when you're a kid, when I was a kid anyway, MLS was like the goal. Like it was before the Premier League, because the Premier League wasn't on every Saturday morning like it is now. I went to MLS games. I went to Metro Stars games as a kid and watched Clint Mathis, watched Tim Howard, watched like Josie Altidore was on the team. That like there were so many guys that I looked up to from that Metro Stars, Red Bull kind of era. and MLS was kind of the pinnacle of professional soccer in my mind. So I was faced with this decision, and I was like, geez, this is tough. Like, what do I do? Do I go? And don't get me wrong, like I was a low round draft pick, so it was a trial. That's all it was with the Union.
Right.
There was no guarantees at all. I was most likely going to be cut. The Union actually had a lot of young strikers at the time. They had Chandler Hoffman, Antoine Hoppenau, had Sebastian Letou was there. They had a lot of strikers, and a lot of strikers that kind of were similar to me, that they already had under contract. So it would have been a very tough situation. But I wonder what would have happened if the Union never called me. So I got drafted. I saw on my computer, and the Union never, like after a draft in the NFL, you see like, so Bill Belichick's on the phone, like, welcome to New England. Like, I never got that call, and I thought it was weird. But it kind of made me think like maybe they're not that, maybe they don't really care. So I actually reached out to Leo Fernandez because he was at Stony Brook, like we discussed, and he was drafted the round after me with the Union. So I reached out to him. I think it was like on Facebook. I was like, hey, have you talked to the Union? He's like, this is maybe the day or two after the draft. He's like, yeah, I'm already here. I took the train from New York. Like I was like, did they call you? And he's like, yeah, they called me. Like they told me all the, like what hotel to meet, all the different like logistics of the trip. Oh, wow. And I was like, this is weird. They never even called me.
Right.
And maybe I should have asked more questions. I should have been like, what is going on here? Why are you not calling me? Why are you not, you drafted me? Like, what was the point drafting me if you're not even going to bring me to preseason? Even for a couple days. But golly, what I found out later was Golly ended up, so Brendan Burke, who was the assistant coach with the Union and the head coach with the Reading, he asked Golly for my number. And Golly told him that I'm going to Israel, like I will not be coming to the Union preseason. So he answered the question for him, for me. For me. And he was like, he's not coming, blah, blah, blah. He's going to Israel. He has a trial in Maccabi Haifa. I didn't know this until
he suddenly had an agent you didn't know about.
Yeah, someone was representing my interest or his interests. Exactly. So, and it was a short turnaround. Like I said, it was only like 4 days before I flew over to Israel. So it wasn't like I had a ton of time to find all this stuff out.
Right.
So I took my flight to Israel, went over to Maccabi Haifa for probably 3 weeks. I was half with the first team, which the level was unbelievable. Like still to this day, the highest level I've trained at. And then I spent, when they was during the season, so they had games. So when they had games or they were traveling, I would train with the under 23 team, the team that I played with over in, with the Jersey, against the Jersey Express. Yeah. So I thought I actually did really well when I was training with the under 23s. It was like younger kids, but I mean, still good players. A lot of them would play for the first team eventually, but that was more, I was coming out of college. I did well there, but then when I was with the first team, I just wasn't up to the level yet. And maybe not ever, but definitely not at that point. And actually right before I went, so Daniel Haber, who was at Cornell, and Noah Sadawi, who was at the same game that me, they both went over before me. And in Israel, you're only allowed 5 foreigners.
Right.
So Haber and Noah both were already signed by the time I got there. So really, you're allowed more than 5 foreigners, but they're not allowed to play. So
did Haber play with Jersey?
Haber did not, but Haber's Jewish, and somehow there was some connection, like with Gali, that I don't know exactly his story, but how he got there. But they're both over there, and these are 2 guys who were playing college soccer like me.
Right.
So they had signed the 2 of them before I even got there. So I think by the time I got there, they were like, we have another one of these kids. Like, we don't need any more. Yeah. So I don't think I ever had a legitimate chance, even if I was unbelievable. Right. So it was it's one of those things. Like, I don't regret the situation because I learned so much going to that. Maybe I would have learned just as much going to the Union and getting cut, which probably would have happened. But it's just one of those.
You never know.
Yeah, you never know. But it's just one of those situations. We can ask John Hackworth when we get him on our podcast.
Yeah,
he was the coach.
I mean, he was look at what happened. I remember that group at the time because they were, it was kind of getting into the Long Island thing, soccer, and so like they had Leo and they had Don Anding from Long Island, and they signed both of them. So
that's true.
Like you never know, So like if our friend Golly hadn't,
I know.
whatever, but it is what it is. So
it is what it is. It happened, and then I guess from there, I guess I'll just continue on in this little story.
Oh yeah.
Unless you have any questions for me before I blabber on more.
No. I mean, this is all we've covered it before, and then we talked about it. I think we're getting everything out there, so we'll keep moving along.
Okay, so from Israel, I was there 3 weeks. Obviously, I didn't get signed. Right before I left, I was like, hey, can you just, to the guy that was Ghali's friend that we were kind of working together with, I was like, hey, can you just get me to a second division club in Israel? Just anywhere, just get me started and let me see if I can do well. And then you can take a look at me in the summer window or whenever. And he's like, no, I can't do that. But I don't know. I don't know why they couldn't do that, but they decided not to do it.
Right.
And so from there, I was like, all right, Ghali, can I go back with the union? And he's like, I don't think so. He was like, I actually think he said, I'll reach out to the union for you. And then what happened was they weren't interested at that point, obviously, because they were 3-4 weeks into preseason. They had already made probably a lot of roster cuts. They didn't want me to come in at that point, which is totally fair. And so from there, I really didn't have anything. I didn't know what to do. So Daniel Haber's teammate at Cornell was Jimmy Lannon. And I had actually gone in the summers.
Current New York Athletic Club head coach, by the way.
That is correct, Jimmy Lannon. So hopefully Jimmy listens to this podcast. Jimmy's a great guy. We had some interesting stories in Germany later on, but we'll get to. Back to the story. So Keith Comfort, best man at my dad's wedding, played together in college. He was goalkeeper coach at Cornell at the time. Okay. When I was in college. So for 2 summers, I believe, I went to the Cornell ID camp as a counselor. So I was with all the other Cornell players. Jimmy Landon was there. Daniel Haber wasn't there, but a few other of the players were there. I got to know him pretty well. And then it was for Yarrow, who was the coach. It was for him to look at high school juniors and seniors. But we were the coaches, the refs. We would, at the night, we would play pickup games. It was a lot of fun. So I got to know Jimmy fairly well. And Daniel Haber and Jimmy obviously had that connection. So he was like, let me give you Jimmy's number. Jimmy's in Austria right now. So Jimmy was signed. He was a year ahead of me in college. So he had already signed in Austria in the second division, the Erste Liga. He was with a club called FC Lustenau. And so from Israel, I flew directly to Austria, and Jimmy's agent, Niesel was his name. His cousin, I believe.
To Axel?
He's not related to Axel, thank goodness. I like Niesel. Niesel's a good guy. Axel, but what was I gonna say? So from there, Niesel was great for me. So there was a bed and breakfast that I stayed at, which were Niesel's friends. Jimmy actually lived with Niesel. He had a 2-bedroom condo. He let Jimmy live with him. He was so great for us. I didn't pay a dime for the bed and breakfast for probably a month, maybe even a little bit more. I was training every day with Jimmy's team, the FC Lustenau and the Erste Liga, which is a full-time professional, it's a good level in Austria. I went to all the games, but the window was already closed in Austria. So I had no chance. When I first came, I thought I was on trial, but in reality, I wasn't. I was just in training. The coach liked me, or seemed to like me anyway, but that was never I wasn't cut. It was just, I was there to train. And then in probably the middle of March, 2013 now, I was like, all right, this is USL teams. The Cosmos had some trials or training opportunities available. I was like, I'm going to go back home, try to get in with a USL team or an NASL team or something like that. Because this Austria thing, it'll be there in the summer. They were like, come back in the summer. We'll see what happens at that point. And I was like, okay. So I left. It was still a great training experience. Learned a lot. It was a good level. But Niesel said the same. He's like, come back in July. We'll try to find you a club if you don't have anything in the States. So I go home to the States. Maybe a week after I'm home, I go Harrisburg City Islanders. They had it was an invite trial that I had. And it was crazy. We stayed in this, basically it was like a Motel 6. and there was 2 beds, a cot. There was a guy sleeping on. There was like 4 guys in a room. It was ridiculous. And I was there 4 days.
Right.
And they had a game against UMBC. It was a friendly game in preseason on the Saturday. So I was there, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And on Friday, the coach at the time, who was it? He was there for a while.
Betcher?
What's that?
Bill Betcher?
Yeah, Bill Betcher was there. Yeah, he was the coach. So he calls all the trialists, which was most of the team. They had a few guys that were like union loanees, like Jimmy McLaughlin was there. There was a few others. But for the most part, a lot of the team was trialists. Kadeem was there, actually. Kevin Garcia was there.
Kevin? Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
Jeff Mateo, was he trying to make a comeback?
Jeff Mateo was not there. But it was a lot of trialists, a lot of good players. But so Bill calls us all over one by one, but we're waiting in like a 15-person line to go talk to Bill 1v1. And finally my turn comes, and Bill's like, listen, Jake, thanks for coming, but like, we're going to release you. We're going to let you go. I was like, I was pissed. I was like, I didn't think I was blowing everybody away, but I looked at it like, I was here for 4 days. We have a game tomorrow. You can't at least let me play in a game for 30, 45 minutes, whatever, and try to prove myself. And I mean, that's his decision. That's fair enough. But at that point I was like, I remember vividly, there was kind of like a supermarket. I don't remember what the supermarket was, but it was a parking lot, maybe 5 minutes away from the training field. And I was driving home. I was about to drive home, but I stopped in the parking lot and I called my dad before I drove home. And I just told him the situation. I was like, hey, like, I'm coming home. They let me go, whatever. And I remember sitting there after I got off the phone with him. I was like so upset, but like not crying upset. I was just like kind of felt like a fraud because I had gotten because Binghamton, obviously it's a smaller school. I was the first player ever drafted. So people looked at it like, wow, he's this MLS player. He's this pro. And here I am in reality, didn't go to the Union, got cut by Haifa, didn't get signed in Austria, didn't get signed by Harrisburg City Islanders, which is like the lowest of the low in U.S. professional soccer. And I was sitting there, I was like, Jesus, I just felt like a fraud. I felt like a fake pro, more or less. I mean, I wasn't a pro, but people looked at me like,
I need an advocate to come into my life.
Yes, that's honestly, I was missing my advocate at this moment. Where were you, Dave?
I was just about to come into the picture, but
he was just about he was about to hatch.
I really don't want to talk about my stuff too much because I really want to keep this about you. But the one funny part, I think we may have discussed this before, was at that time, again, I'm doing the coverage, so with the Long Island stuff. So I was in touch with the union quite a bit because at the time I was, trying to get information. I was getting pictures of Don and Anding and Leo Fernandez. That's why I remember those stuff so vividly of them, in training camp with Philly and all that. So, and then at the same time, Gazikis was trying to get me one of the other Gus's in the Flames was getting me on board with Flames and was gearing me up to start covering the team in the spring. And so I was trying to do some work for that. So I was reaching out to them about this guy who I heard of, but I never met before, named Jay Keegan. And I was trying to see if I could get any pictures of you, to put out on social media with the Flames and I kept getting we don't really know what's going on there, messages and stuff like that. So it was our paths were starting to come together, but it was we weren't quite there yet. But it was we were gradually getting ready to meet. And then when you did come back and when you went to Jersey, now obviously, especially now if you tell me your connection with Jeff, it makes a lot more sense. But at the time, to me, I was just kind of I mean, I could see that the Flames were a mess, but in terms of organization, but for the PDL but I didn't quite get the whole connection of why he went to Jersey because you did have Jose there who was the agent, and I was like, why not come back to the Flames where you had your success, and but I mean, it all made sense to me later on. So we were starting, when you, in my mind, I'm thinking, trying to get stories going. So when the Flames were playing Jersey and you were on the other team, I was taking pictures and trying to promote that here's the former Flame, former Flame, playing for Jersey, for the two people that might actually come and watch the game, and they didn't even come. So, but that wasn't your fault. It was, it was what it was. But
yeah, the reason why, I mean, besides Jeff, and Jeff wasn't even the main reason. The main reason was because I was still being advised by Gali, and I still trusted him at that point. And he was telling me things like, "We'll get you over to Europe. We'll do this. Get you back to Israel." There was he was just telling me things, and at that point I still trusted him, and that's why I went back to the Express, because I was still in with him, and I felt like that was a more viable option than Jose for whatever reason. That was how I felt at the time, but actually in between that, before even the PDL started, I went on trial also with the Cosmos. Before they had, it was
and
invite.
They were looking at a lot of guys like you.
They were looking at a lot of guys, and I was one of them. I mean, I thought I did okay at that, but I wasn't. We played in a game. I didn't have too many qualms about. I remember Aleko Eskandarian gave me a call. They were nice about it. They were just like, "Hey, listen, we're not looking to sign you right now," and it was totally fair. I felt like I had an opportunity to show myself. Didn't do quite well enough. That would have been really fun because the Cosmos ended up winning 2 of the first 3 championships and being really successful. But I mean, it is what it is.
Well, they looked at a lot of young guys, but they basically went with, a lot of guys that Gio knew from Ed Oval, and they also and mostly veteran players, to try to make sure that they won and started drawing a crowd, and so
But then after that, I went to the Express, did whatever, played 9 games I think with the Express that season, and then I had told them at the beginning, I was like, listen, in July, I'm going to go, if I have nothing else at that time, I'm going to go back to Austria. Because Niesel had already told me, come July 1st. That's when the window opens. We'll get you on trial. And Gali at the beginning said that was fine. Jeff said that was fine. And Jeff was totally fine with it when I told him end of June, listen, this is my last game with the Express. I'm going to go over. But Gali he was not happy. He was like, this is not right, blah, 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 blah. I just didn't understand. He was mad because it wasn't through him and it wasn't about him and I was leading his team. But whatever. I mean, he had no control over me. It's an amateur league, so I was allowed to go. But I went over. So the team that Jimmy had played with them previous season, they had financial problems, so they dropped down to an amateur division, FC Lucenau. But Jimmy and I went on trial with Patrick Slogic, who was another Cornell guy.
Right.
We all 3 of us. Well, Slogic was still in college. He was going to be a senior, so he was more training. Whereas me and Jimmy were on trial with Austria Lucenau, which is in the same league, but they were a much better team. I think they finished second in the Erste Liga that season, and they were very good. But we trained there for the full month of July, and at the same time, we were also training with a team called I'm going to say it wrong, but it's FC Hard. It's Fahard. I don't know how the Austrians pronounce it, but that was a 3rd division team. So that was more it was still a pretty good level, but it was, some guys had jobs. You trained in the evenings. It was a level that I could have easily played at and done well. So by the end of July, I go to Niesel. I'm like, listen, Austria Lucenau isn't making an offer. Let me just sign with Hard and we'll go from there. I'll do well there and we'll move on. And Niesel looked into it, and he probably should have done this earlier, but he looked into it and he's like, so in the 3rd division in Austria, the window to sign foreigners closes July 15th. And this was the end of July, beginning of August, something like that. So the window was closed. It was open for the Erste Liga still, but it was closed for that 3rd tier. So we weren't able to sign there. So at that point, I was pissed. I was like, I came over here. What are we doing? What are we doing? I can't just train the whole year. I need actual opportunities. And I mean, I loved Austria. It was a great place to live. The bed and breakfast where I stayed was awesome. The family was so nice. There was honestly, the daughter was really cute. There was a physical therapist that was really cute. It was just a fun atmosphere to be in. And it was, the family, the mom was so nice. They made all my meals, stayed there for free. It was just unbelievable. And I really thank them. And it was still something I look back on fondly, that Austrian experience. But at that moment, I was just so pissed. And I felt like a fraud. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, why am I here if I can't play anywhere and like no team wants me? So that is where, let us introduce the man of the hour.
Well, you're the man of the hour.
And this is where everything turns around. Are we ready?
Yeah.
Should we do part 2? Should we pause it now and start part 2?
Nah, go ahead.
We'll just, hey, sorry guys, if this is a 2-hour episode, you're just gonna have to deal with it.
It might be a 4-hour episode. Deep dive into Jake.
The deep dive, for all of you that care about me. So you had emailed me. Well, first we did a story. That was first, right?
Yeah.
We had connected. We had done a story for the Flames website, just on my experiences getting drafted and all that.
Yeah.
So we got in touch that way first. And then
in my attempt to do some serious journalism.
Exactly.
The worst team ever created in PDL for one of them.
Exactly. But then you were like, all right, you sent me an email. You're like, I have this agent, Axel. I can put you in touch with him. He has a lot of players in like lower German leagues. And you can correct me if I'm telling you this story wrong. But I feel like that's pretty accurate. And so you put me in touch with Axel, and I reached out to Axel. I gave him a call. I remember I was at a lake in Austria with Jimmy and Niesel, and we were just, well, go on.
Just real quick, what was my motivation for doing that? Do you remember?
Your motivation? Just to try to get me a team, right?
Yeah. And also, it was to try to help you, but also just so everybody else, is listening also understands the context. Coming into the Flames being the Flames, and I'm trying to, help. I was really trying to help. I mean, I got along with Gus Scuba's a nice guy. It still is. But, I was more involved with Gus, and I was trying to help, build up the club again and get players to come in, and you're competing, with like Red Bulls and, things like, so serious clubs. And what I was trying to do was to develop, I was taking whatever was available to me, networking, and the opportunity with Axel came up, and I was trying to find guys that I could work with that, might be able to take it, do well, and then be able to publicize that and use that as a tool for recruiting future players in the coming year. So like that was the real like impetus behind it. But I mean, I didn't really get to know you or anything, but I was just like, well, you seem like you're a talented player. And the other thing was that it was frustrating to me that you were like slipping through the cracks, like you weren't really getting your opportunity here. Mm-hmm. Whereas like if we were in England or something, Ireland even, you would have had more opportunities. It just soccer is more advanced, Germany, Austria, whatever. So here in America, seeing a player like you that had been drafted, highly touted, top scorer in PDL, for 1 year, like to me, in my mind, it made no sense that you would not be getting a chance to play professional soccer. Like that just, if it's the premier developmental league and you have your top goal scorer from 2 years ago can't find a team, then what is going on in American soccer? Like I'm making a hand motion, but it's like a disconnect in my mind. Logically, in another country, barring, you doing something really outrageous off the field and getting arrested, like you would get an opportunity at least. So anyway, go ahead, back to your story though. Continue.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I appreciate your insight into this, because I knew that is part of your what you want to do, but it is interesting hearing it, and it's flattering in a sense too that you put that much interest into my career, just overseas, failing left, right, and center, getting told no by everyone under the sun.
Nobody outside of you had any idea of it. So go ahead.
Yeah. So then anyway, back to the story. I reached out to Axel. You had given me his number. I called him, and he was just like, "Yeah, we'll get you trials in the 6th division, the 5th division, and the 4th division in Germany." So for those that don't know, the 4th, 5th, and 6th division in Germany is very similar to the 4th, 5th, and 6th division in England. Like the German system is very good. So the 4th tier is a very high level. 5th and 6th, you're getting a little bit more questionable, more like a cross between Sunday League sometimes, but also some very, very good players. So it's a little bit more of a mix. Like some guys take it seriously, some don't. But so he brought me in. I went to He had a house. There was like 10 at least Americans living in this house, and they were all guys that he had brought over for the same purpose, to set up on trials, to set up with teams in 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th tier. So the first trial I went on was FCA Darmstadt, and the second trial, which was the next day I think, was with TSG Usingen. They were both in the German 6th division, the Verbandsliga is what it's called. It's it's in Darmstadt, which is just outside of Frankfurt. So maybe 30 minutes from Frankfurt. So I had those two teams, and at both trials I did very well. Both teams were interested in me. I don't remember exactly why I chose Darmstadt. There was another American at Darmstadt, with Jonathan Koshko, which may have played a role. But the owner was really, he was a crazy guy, but he's really passionate. Andy B, Andreas Bergerman. And I ended up choosing Darmstadt, and they moved me. Maybe it was because they were giving us housing and free food, and actually they gave us a big red van. Maybe we didn't get paid very much money. It was kind of, I got paid $150 a month, but it was kind of under the table. I don't know if the other guys were getting it. Definitely, it wasn't a professional contract, but it was it's kind of like, yeah, you'll do this. And it was free food. Every time we went shopping, they gave us free food. So I ended up anyway, back to the story, decided to go there and play with FCA Darmstadt in the 6th tier. And Jimmy was still back in Austria. So I called Jimmy. I was like, hey, you want to come to this club? Do you have nothing else? Just come. So then Jimmy ended up coming. He signed as well. So we had Jonathan Koshko, Jimmy Lannon, and myself, 3 Americans at this club in Germany. And we lived together for the first maybe 2 months. We lived in this, it was a really nice apartment right in the middle of the city, but it was a 1-bedroom. So Jimmy and I slept in the same bed, and Jonathan Koshko slept on the couch. So it wasn't perfect, but it was. And at this time,
You got much closer to Jimmy Lannon than you ever expected.
Yeah, a little too close, honestly. At that time, we didn't. Luckily, the beds were European beds. It was even if it's a queen or a double bed, it's 2 singles side by side.
Yeah.
So even though it's in the same bed, it's a little strange. But we were the beds. I'm explaining it just for myself, for my own reasons. But yeah, so we lived there, and then at the same time, they were renovating apartments at the training ground. So for the last 2 months I was there, we lived at the training ground. Pretty nice apartment. We could walk outside, train in however many times we wanted. It was a decent enough setup. The team wasn't great. It was a much lower level than I thought I could play at, point blank. So pretty much right when I got there, I was like, how soon can I get out of here and go to a higher level? And I scored a lot of goals for them. And then during that same time, Axel was organizing trials with 5th division clubs and 4th division clubs. So I went on trial with RW Darmstadt, Red Rot-West Darmstadt in the 5th division, which is the Hessen Liga, and Victoria Aschaffenburg, which were in the Regional Liga, which ended the 4th tier in Germany. Right. And the RW Darmstadt team really wanted to sign me for the Germany is a kind of there's a winter break. So for the second half of the season, he wanted to sign me, and I was considering that. That was one option. The Aschaffenburg team didn't want to sign me. They weren't interested. And then at the same time, Dave Harris, my advocate extraordinaire, is, I don't know, you must have reached out to Liam, basically Liam Buckley, who's coach at St. Patrick Athletic in Ireland, basically saying, I had this player for you.
It was a little more involved than that.
Yeah, whatever happened. And at this time, I had one of those prepaid flip phones, right? So I didn't even know if if I could call Ireland. So what ended up having to happen is I couldn't call Liam, but Liam could call me. So at some point towards the end of my time, it was probably November or December, yeah. Liam, we maybe 2 or 3 times we'd be on the phone with each other, and he would be asking me about my games, how things are going, all this different stuff. And I was I had no idea. I knew Ireland was on FIFA. We would play a lot of FIFA, and I would play with St. Patrick Athletic on the game, and that's pretty much all I knew about it. And eventually, towards the end, Liam was like, I'm not going to sign you. I mean, at that time, they had just won the league. Yeah. The next year, they won the FA Cup. They were really successful. So he shouldn't have signed me. I'm just on paper for sure. But he was nice enough. He said, I have a friend, Tommy Dunn, who is coaching in Galway, and we'll get to that part of the story. But there was, before we get there was a lot of this stuff in Germany in terms of like the living and like we went to Oktoberfest and we had this like 12-seater van, like one of those like passenger vans the team would drive in. And Jimmy, John, and I were driving into Oktoberfest in this ridiculous red van. It was like from 1985. But there was just so many funny stories from that time because like it wasn't as professionally run as all the other clubs I've played for afterwards. Whereas you're set up perfectly, this and that. We actually had a fourth American come, Brian Rogers, towards the end. Yeah, you probably know. He's from New York, highly regarded prospect at one point. So we had 4 guys, and
drafted in MLS.
Drafted in MLS as well. So at the end we had 4 Americans, and it was a very like. It was an interesting setup. Like it was somewhere that I wanted to leave, but it was, I don't know how to say it. Like it was just, so Andy B, here's a story for you. Andy B is like, he's a great guy, but he is insane. He is 100 miles an hour as a business guy. He's 100 miles an hour all day. And he's also 200 miles an hour on the road. So we're driving to a game in his car and he's going on the Autobahn, which you can drive as fast as you want. And this man is going like, I don't know, 220 kilometers, just a ridiculous pace. And me and Jimmy are in the car. We're like, dude, settle down. Yeah. Like we had to ask him to slow down. And then he slowed down. It's just, there's a lot of stuff like, and he's a great guy. And he had us over to the house.
But who is he?
Sorry. Did I not say who he was? He's the owner of the club. Okay. So he also had this place where it was basically like a brothel, but like a very like a country club brothel. Yeah. So you'd go there, or I didn't go there, but so the 4 Americans, he was like, you guys all get 1 girl on me. That was, oh God. He's like, you all get 1, and I won't say which ones did, but 2 of us said yes, and I said no, and another guy said no. So I'll leave it up to the imagination. But it was basically this place where you go in, you get like 5-course meal set up. There's this spa, jacuzzi, and then you have hookers. But it was just, it's one of those like, there's so many things that go on, and you're just like, what is happening right now? But I feel like I'm rambling about FCA. So ask me a question.
No. It's the lower level experience of playing in Germany that like it's definitely something for everybody, anybody who's still listening, who's still awake, like a lot of what Dylan and Sean talk about with Footwork podcast. And there's a lot out there now, I think, about, it's a very popular, common thing for, American players to be in Germany. And I didn't realize the full extent of it, until years later, but, obviously like, they were looking at it as, and they still do look at it as a way to bring players in that can boost the level of the squad, but also they look at it as a potential way of making money and maybe finding a diamond in the rough type player that had been overlooked, and especially at that time, going back, like just a quick shout out to Zach Goss if he's listening, because Zach was actually kind of like my first player I sort of advocated for, but I think with Zach, the biggest, because it was through Zach that I got Axel's details. So, I was trying to advocate for Zach, trying to find opportunities, and he had come up to play for Westchester, and he had just had not gotten the opportunities with coming from Brooklyn and Brooklyn Knights, and it just was like for him, he was a little bit, past, the point of where I think clubs, I think Axel even said like he's a little too old, but you were still at that point where young enough and had that background, and so like in American soccer at the time, USL clubs, very few and far between, and opportunities just weren't there for guys like yourself, and for Zach maybe a few years before that would have been more of the right time for him, and then even for Evan, Nadner was the next year in 2014. He had played for FA Euro, and I just remember seeing he's up in the Bronx, and why is this kid going to play for FA Euro when it's Westchester? They should be getting the best players from that area coming to Westchester, and so I reached out to Evan to try to recruit some better players, and I didn't know that Evan had the EU passport, and through your opportunity in Germany, it opened that door for Evan to go over there the following year. I think he only played a couple of games for the Flames, and then he went over, but that was okay because the way I looked at it is, it was like, guys, it's kind of the reverse of Gali. It was just opening doors for guys, and through that, then if he did well, you get more guys to come in. So, but it touches on a lot of American soccer. And so it's an interesting story, to hear about Germany and your experiences there, and then but like you did really do, you said the level wasn't that high, and you were scored 10 goals in 10 games, and you were just kind of like going through the league. It seemed like in the games you played.
Yeah, I ended up scoring 12 and 18 in total, but yeah, it was like maybe a little bit like a similar to college level. Yeah. Maybe a little bit, but players didn't take it as seriously. Yeah. But the level of player was about a college level player. It's just some guys, so we had one guy who before the game, he would just, or before practice, he just smoked a cigarette. Yeah. As the 4 American guys were like, what is happening? Yeah. And they're just like, yeah, he smokes a cigarette before the game. And we're just like, oh, and he was one of the fittest guys on our team. Yeah. So it's just like, it was one of those, like some guys were taking it seriously. We had a few young guys who were maybe trying to come over to college or trying to play in higher levels in Germany. And then we had a bunch that they were just doing this because it was a Sunday league. That's all it was. It was a Sunday league. So it was a big mix.
So then on to Ireland.
All right. So where do you want me to begin, Dave?
Well, the context, as it relates to you, I really won't talk about it too long, but just the whole thing with Liam basically was that I got to meet him. Okay. I'd done some coverage over there in Ireland, and basically my thinking, we actually had a nice discussion just about soccer, and, I kind of did, I was going to do an article, and I never ended up doing the article, but we talked a lot about soccer, and, I just thought that the level of Ireland was good, but I thought that maybe it would be an opportunity for some of the clubs over there to take a player like yourself. I remember talking to Liam about yourself, and like Jimmy Nealis was a player who had been drafted, good player from Long Island. Just a couple of guys like yourselves, maybe a couple others, and just that, at the time in American soccer, there weren't as many clubs, as many opportunities. Guys were slipping through the cracks, and that maybe somebody could come over and do well over there. And I kind of kept hounding him, and then lo and behold, he's a good-hearted guy. I know you and him, I think you were still get along, but personally, but just he didn't see you as the player, and you kind of felt like you didn't really get your chance. But that's later on down the road. But at that time, he opened the door for you to get to Galway. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, Liam is a great guy, and he's a very successful manager. We had maybe a little bit of disagreement in terms of how much I should have been utilized in the one season I ended up playing with him. But all in all, I'm very thankful for Liam because he got me this opportunity in Galway with Tommy Dunn. So I went back to New York for the winter break in Germany. Right. And during this time, Tommy called me, and he was like, can you come over for a trial in Galway? And Galway they were just reborn again because they had gone bankrupt in 2011. And they filed for bankruptcy, and they had to be reborn as a different entity. So instead of being Galway United, which they had always been called for decades, they had to be called Galway FC for that first year. So then they had to start in the second division, which is the lowest like professional division tier in Ireland or whatever, first team division in Ireland.
Well,
so I went over.
Division, right?
What's that?
It's the first division. It's the second tier.
Second tier. Yeah. It's called the first division, but it's the second tier. So
I
went over there for a trial. I remember being like, I just took the train. We were talking about this with Vinny in the last episode. Like, took the train into Galway, trained 3 days. Didn't think I did particularly well in those 3 days, but Tommy saw something in me clearly, and he signed me right away after that first weekend. And then that first season it started off really slowly for myself personally. I ended up scoring, I think it was the second game. It was in a cup game. But after that, I didn't score a league goal until like 10 or 11 games in. The first few games I started on the wing, and then I moved kind of to the bench. Then I came back onto the wing, and I was kind of back and forth between bench and starting on the wing. And then it was away to Shamrock Rovers, second team. We were down 1-0. We were down a man as well. And that beginning of the year, we hadn't been doing particularly well either. We had good players in our team, and we'd win one, we'd tie one, we'd lose one. It was just very inconsistent. So that game I came on. I actually think I came on for Vinny, if I remember correctly. Funny enough. Vinny Verity. I came on for Vinny, maybe 55th minute. 10 minutes later, score a goal from 20 yards out, upper corner. We're tied 1-1. We end up tying. We get a result after being down a goal and down a man, and like that kind of kick-started my season. And from there on, I was regularly in the team, scored like week in, week out for the most part. And I ended up finishing the season with 17 goals, 15 in the league, after not scoring for the first almost third of it. So I was really happy with how it went. It was a really good return for myself. And that year we ended up, like, towards the end of the year, we had a very successful run of results, and we ended up making the playoff. Then we won the playoff semifinal against Shelburne over 2 legs. We won on aggregate 4-1. And then the final against UCD, and UCD were in the Premier Division at the time. They were second bottom. So the winner of the first division playoff, second and third, played the 11th place team in the Premier Division. And over 2 legs, we beat UCD 5-1. So I remember the first game we were actually down 1-0 in the first leg away to UCD. And in like the 89th minute, Paddy Barrett scored. And Paddy Barrett went on. He's been in USL Championship with Cincinnati in the 11. He was at Dundalk when Dundalk were in the European group stages as well. So he was a very good player. And then Ryan Manning scored the winner. Ryan Manning, after that season, he went on. He signed with QPR. He is now with Swansea in the Championship. So like the quality of this team for the Irish First Division, looking back, we should have won the league. We shouldn't have had to go to a playoff. We even had Ryan Connolly, who was at Derby County he made first year appearances with Derby County. We had Vinny, who's a very good player. We ended up having Enda Curran. And then we also had guys like Colm Horgan, Mark Ludden, who are kind of Galway United stalwarts, and they've been around for a long time. I'm sure I'm missing 1 or 2, but we had a very good team. Tommy was a good manager. And that first season I grew so much. Like, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, I was a completely different player.
But one of the interesting experiences was your, I guess, maybe the early part of your time there when you were living with Tommy. And I remember around this time, I guess, I think it was the following year when I came over to Galway, and I got to see the house. Tommy took me back to his house, and he was showing me the place where you were staying with him or something like that. And we went out for pints, but you didn't have any pints. But you were there with us the next day, and like just the two of you, like a lot of things that like the two of you didn't know about each other. So I remember joking with the two of you, like you lived together for like a few months, and you don't know anything about each other. So like any good stories about living with Tommy Dunn?
Well, I can tell you all the shit I got from all the guys on the team. Like, I was called Tommy's son, this and that. So we, like, Ryan Connolly was the worst. He would give me shit constantly. He's like, you're living with a fucking gaffer. I can't even do his accent properly, but it was a funny time because we were living. He was based in Cork at the time, so his family was living in Cork, and so he would commute down. So at first we were both staying in the Connacht Hotel, different rooms obviously, but in the same hotel. And then eventually the club were like, we can't keep paying for 2 hotel rooms, obviously, and so he moved into an apartment.
How was the Connacht Hotel, by the way?
Amazing.
Oh, okay.
I never wanted to leave. It was so nice. It had like a gorgeous swimming pool, jacuzzi, gym. It had everything I needed. So honestly, when I had to leave, I was
sleeping with Jimmy Lannon to next to Jimmy Lannon to the Connacht Hotel.
Yeah, it was actually it was a very nice setup. But so Tommy moved into this apartment. It was relatively nice. It was near kind of the city center area, and they needed to get me out as well. And they didn't have housing for me because I was the only guy outside of the Galway region. So like there was a couple guys from Mayo, maybe 1 or 2 from. So Gary Shanahan was from Limerick. Gary Shanahan was a very good player for us as well. I didn't mention him, but there was a lot of guys around, but they all would commute. So there was no housing. I was the only player that needed to be housed, me and Tommy. So Tommy's like, all right, you're going to come live with me in his apartment. And that was a 2-bedroom. So I stayed there, but we would have this routine, right? We'd go to Dunn Stores. It was also, his name's Tommy Dunn. This place was called Dunn Stores. We'd go shopping together.
It's a big store in Ireland.
Yeah, it's a grocery store. We'd go shopping together. He would like give me tips on nutrition, and like he would be like, we should have this, we should have that. And then like one night he would cook and the next night I would cook. And we'd it was so we'd sit at the table. Well, we would sit at the table. I don't even remember what we would talk about because we wouldn't talk about life, and it was probably just about the games and like training and stuff, and what I thought of other players, things like that. And then we'd go sit down. We had to have a TV. We had like it was like a small setup, but like we each had our own couch area we'd sit at, and we'd watch like so much, like 2.5 Men. And like we'd just sit there, watch that, and then we'd each go to bed at like 10 o'clock. And what I didn't realize at the time is Tommy loves a pint of Guinness. Like he loves a pint. But when I was there, he never had one. Like there was a bottle of wine that like stayed up top. I don't think he drank that either. Like to his credit, he hid it from me. If he was drinking, he hid it from me very well. And I was with him. It was a little weird, but
I think I would think like it would be more of like if he would go out, he'd have a pint. I don't know if he'd be drinking at home because like
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. Maybe he would always go out, but I would just think like because he had the bottle of wine.
Out that often because like he's married. Especially at the time he was married with like 3 young girls. So like
but they weren't there. So like you could go and just sit at the bar, watch a game type thing, and he never. I mean, when I was living with him, he didn't seem to do that. But
yeah.
I don't know. But after like I think it was a new club, a lot of pressure, obviously.
Yeah,
and
he was,
I think
he
after
was
like
constantly looking at videos of the games and training and trying to do he was juggling a lot of balls like for manager of a small club in Division 1 Ireland. There's a lot, and he also had a lot of turnover that year too within the players,
it was a completely new club, so everybody was new.
Yeah.
But then after like a month or two, finally, like the heckling of the players probably got to him, and he was like, "Listen, you're gonna have to find your own place." And he kind of sat me down. He's like, "You're gonna have to find your own place. Sorry," like that type of thing. And so I had to find my own place. I had to go on. I don't remember how I found it exactly. Basically, like some sort of Craigslist for apartments type thing in Ireland, and I stayed with. Basically, it was college students, mostly college students. So
you actually had to get your own apartment.
I had to get my own apartment.
The club didn't give you an apartment.
I think they may have like reimbursed me part of it.
Oh, okay.
I think they gave me like 50 euros a week for housing, I think the apartment was. I think it was more. The cost of it was more. I mean, but it is very cheap in Ireland, especially the place that I was living. It was like a 5-bedroom house. It wasn't very nice. It wasn't a great part of great part of town. So I stayed there for, I want to say till probably like 5 months probably. Stayed
Right.
in this apartment. And it was interesting because one of the guys I lived with actually became a fan of the team. So there was one game I came home and there was like this like fake newspaper drawing of like a cartoon kind of thing of like all the breakdown of the game, and like they were talking about Tommy and the rest of the team and like how like I scored that game, and it was like a joke, but it was very funny. It was up on the in the kitchen on the fridge when I got home. But it was nice. It was weird living with them, but it was also kind of nice getting to know people outside of just the Galway team. And then in September, we signed Paddy Barrett, and he was from Waterford. We signed Robbie Egan in August, I think it was, and I forgot where he was. I think he was at loan. And Gary Shanahan, who was from Limerick, also wanted housing. So they said, okay, and we took over Tommy's apartment. We kicked Tommy out of his own place. I don't remember where Tommy stayed those last 2 months of the season. But it was a 2-bedroom. So me and Gary stayed in one room, and Robbie Egan and Paddy Barrett stayed in the other room. So that was a much better living arrangement for sure. Yeah, we kicked Tommy out of his own place.
The manager has to go.
I don't know where he stayed. Maybe back at the Connacht the last couple of months.
I remember he brought me back there like the first night I was there in Galway with Brian, my cousin, Liverpool, and we were just hanging out and then going down to see you play, and like we went out for pints or whatever, and like he brought us back there, and he's just like, this place is a shithole, isn't it? I was like,
it actually,
what's okay to me? I mean,
it actually wasn't that bad.
I know.
It wasn't that bad. Like it
wasn't pretty funny.
Yeah, it wasn't like modern apartment beautiful, but I was happy enough to live there. It was way better than the housing I had with those kids by far, like not even close. So I was fine with it. And then, I mean, obviously that year we get promoted and things are great. Like, and Tommy immediately says he wants me back for the following season in the Premier Division. Now this is a big step up in level. So that was a big question mark. I think even Galway fans asked that at the time. Like, here's this American kid. He obviously did pretty well towards the end of the season, but is he good enough to make that jump into the Premier Division in Ireland, which is the top division in Ireland? And it was a fair question. And I think they had a question like about a lot of our players.
You felt that?
I think so, yeah. Because we even heard before the playoff final, some of the like kind of old men at the club, like the old supporters, were saying like, if you get promoted now, it's a bit too soon. You'll just go straight back down. It'll actually do more harm to the club by getting promoted, because like rather than staying in the first division for a year or two, building up your squad and then going to the Premier Division. Right. Their thought process was, if we go straight away, we're just going to be straight back down, and then we're going to be back in the shit again, more or less. And they were wrong, obviously. But that was kind of, because in Galway, like Vinny was talking about in the last episode, or I guess it'll be like 3 episodes ago now, whenever we post this. But it's a small town, so you do hear the rumblings. Like if you go down to Ayr Square, and they don't necessarily recognize your face, but if you're wearing a Galway top, they're like, "Oh, you play for Galway United," or this and that, and they'll start asking. And probably me, because I'm a foreigner, I'm slightly more recognizable because I'm the American, and once they hear me talk. So there would be.
You got to remember the colleges there too. There's a lot of Americans, so like
that's true. There were a lot of Americans at NUIT, so it's interesting because it's such a small town that you would get stopped. Not a ton, but you would get stopped, and you'd hear the rumblings of what the supporters were saying. So that's kind of where I come from in terms of maybe they had questions about us in the Premier Division.
But just in fairness to context, also like Galway, it's a small city. It's for Ireland. It's a fairly big city. It's like one of the larger cities in Ireland, but it's a small city. By most people's I think terms. But for Ireland, it is one of the larger cities. So like, they definitely, on the other side of the coin, there is potential there. Like if there were a lot of investment and if they were able to like really build the club up. I think that's what kind of Vinny was getting at a bit when he was talking, about it in his episode. Being able to keep players from the area with the club, or have the funding to be able to put up players and like build up the club. You know, like there is potential, there is opportunity there, like to grow the club. You know, but it would take a lot of time and money, and it's also an area where I think there's a lot of interest in Gaelic and a lot of Ireland, and so those kinds of things go against a little bit of the. I mean, it's very much a Gaelic area, so that makes it a little harder for them to grow the soccer there. Because I mean, even like you had players like I forget how to pronounce the name of
Hodge, Cunningham,
yeah, who's seemed like a good up and coming young player, and then he goes and plays Gaelic, So
well, he actually, so when we had that friend the following season, 2015, he had a very good kind of spell of games, scored a decent amount of goals, and then we had a friendly against Liverpool. He scored against Liverpool, and he played. He was man of the match, and Liverpool wanted him on a trial. And I don't remember exactly why he didn't go right away. Maybe Tommy didn't want him to go because obviously we were playing games, whatever. And then 2 weeks later, he does his meniscus or some sort of cartilage in his knee, and the trial never materialized.
Oh.
So it's very unfortunate for him. And then I think the following year, he wasn't quite as good, and then he just kind of fell out of love with the game probably, and he went over to Gaelic. Yeah. But he was one, like when he was 18 years old, he was strong, he was fast, and he had a really good spell of games in the Premier Division, then scored against Liverpool, and people were saying like he could be the next big thing in Galway, like next guy to go across the pond, and just never happened for him. But it's tough.
So so we kind of skirted over. Are there any other stories especially from that first year in Galway that we talked about promotion and all that, and you're kind of gearing up, but like anything else? I mean, there was a lot of like definitely a lot of ups as the season wore on, from what I remember.
The coolest experience I'll say is, aside from all like the success on the field, the first game of the season against Longford, it was like one of our biggest crowds of the year, close to a sellout. So we have the president of Ireland, who's from Galway. He comes over, he shakes everybody's hand. He's at the game. He's a big supporter of Galway United. And then the first game, the fans obviously took a liking to me. So like the main supporters section was a large portion of the game. They were chanting USA, USA. And I was like, at the time, I was like, I figured it was for me, but I was never expecting that in a million years.
Were there any other Americans out there?
There were not. Like I said, I knew it was for me, but I was just like, that is all. And it was like loud, and it was frequent, and it was flattering, honestly. So that was like it was a really cool experience to have my first game with this new club, and they're just chanting for my country.
And that was in 2014.
That was the first game I played for the club.
Wow.
The whole game.
Okay.
It was a lot. I mean, they did
it through the year. It, but I thought it was something that might have built up gradually over time.
The first game, they were doing it constantly. And they did it over the course of the 2 years. They did it a lot, but it was very flattering. I mean, obviously, they saw preseason games in the first year, and they took a liking to me, then they did that. So it's just, I mean, it's really cool. Irish people love Americans. It's like they take a liking to us anyway.
Oh, so. They definitely do, but like they really, from an outside perspective, like they really, when I was over there in 2015, meeting the guys from the club and kind of getting the tour, like you always get a tour of Ireland whenever you're like an American over there, and like but they really, all of the guys that I talked with really had a big definitely had a lot of fondness for you, and they like the way you play, they just really they love how like you're hustle, and just always giving a lot of effort, and it's very much the style that they appreciate, they enjoy watching. So like any kind of player that goes over there and plays hard and runs and puts a lot of effort in, and especially scores goals, like then they'll really they'll really fall for it. So it was, I mean, it was a great time, like but anything else that stood out as far as anything with any of the games, any players you played with or against, anything that like any type of defender that you played against that was really good, and just you're like like, or just any jitters or nerves or any doubts, ups and downs, things like that.
There were definitely plenty of ups and downs. Just like I said, the first 10 games were tough. The one I remember playing against Lee Desmond. He was at Shells.
Okay.
He was very good. He was a young player at Shells, and Shells were our promotion semifinal. We played them, and they were like, we were very equal to them in the league. And they had Lee Desmond. They also had Dylan Connolly, who went over to Ipswich, I believe, or one of the English clubs right after that. Okay. There were a lot of good players in that first division. I'm trying to remember.
But was Lee Desmond like a player that you played against that stood out that you were like,
yeah. Yes.
I had played against something like this often, or I had played against something like this before, or
yeah, absolutely. He's good defensively, but in terms of the things that is most impressive for me is how he plays the ball into midfield, like balls on the ground, connecting passes to the midfielders. Like he can pick a pass. Like he's so good at this. Like he's left-footed, so he'll play like a lot of center backs on the left side. They'll play the striker here to the feet occasionally, but they'll play like their right foot. So it's like on the same side of the field, right? So he'll play like kind of a straight ball into the striker. Whereas what Lee does so well, and I realized this later when I ended up playing with him, is he'll play the ball, like kind of like cut it a little bit. So it's on the striker's left foot. So they're already kind of like on the turn. And then it happened a few times at Pat's where like I'd be on the turn and then I'd slip the winger in. So I think he's just so smart in terms of the passes he plays, and also like the weighted pass. But that was definitely something like I could tell like that's a player, for sure.
Right. So definitely a good level, good standard, and then that led you into the off season then between 2014 2015 when the saga of Willie Woney and How Willie.
Yeah, I completely forgot the work permit story of 2014 work permit. But
that was a saga.
That was a saga. So I'll go over that quick, and then we'll go into the off season. So basically, when I got to Galway, I was on a holiday visa, 3 months, and in those 3 months, I signed a professional contract, which should never have been allowed. Never. You're supposed to get a work permit to have a professional contract in a foreign country. But what they did was the FAI, for some reason, approved the contract without a work permit. They shouldn't have done that. The FAI, thank you, FAI, for allowing that to happen. But I'm there for 3 months, and my 3 months is over in April. So Ronan Coleman, who we discussed on the Vinny podcast a little bit, a big supporter of the club, he worked in kind of the government offices type thing, one of those type jobs. So we would go in every 3 months and file an appeal to have my holiday visa extended. And in Ireland, the rule is if your visa extension gets denied, you can appeal it. And you don't have to leave the country pending appeal. So what happened in April? We filed an extension. This is the most Irish. This is the most Irish story ever. I can't believe I forgot it. So we file an appeal for an extension. Then we get it back probably in June, we'll say. Denied. We're like, all right, we'll just file another one. We file another appeal. I get it back in maybe August. Denied. We're like, all right, no worries. We'll file another appeal. We're appealing the same thing, an extension of the holiday visa. Finally, and this is the weirdest part, the final time we apply for it or we appeal for it, it gets granted. So they said they accepted the extension of the holiday visa, and it was like 3 days before I was leaving. It was after the season had finished. So I went like literally the day before my flight. I had to get my passport stamped just so like I was legally here in the country the whole time and get approval. Because at that time, Tommy already wanted me back for the following season. So we were going to do it legitimately the second time, like get a work permit, do all that stuff. So they wanted to just make sure nothing on my passport would cause me not to be allowed into the country, which makes sense. So then got that done. And then we applied for the work permit. For the following season, but the work permit took forever. Yeah. And I remember talking to you at this time. I was like, I needed a Snickers.
You were getting.
Do you get the joke? Like,
I get the joke.
I was like, you
were getting cranky. I was like,
you're not you when you're hungry. But yeah, I ended up coming to preseason 2 weeks before the start of the season, so I missed like a month. And again, I started off the season really slow, and I think a big part of that was because of the no preseason. But I mean, it's part of it. Like, I don't want to use it as an excuse, but it's just the way it worked out.
It did throw things off a bit.
Yeah, it was very annoying. Tommy was annoyed. Everybody was annoyed.
No, I know. I remember talking to him.
It was the hand we were dealt. So then, that season, I played every single game, started every single game bar one, basically played 90 minutes every single game. Like, Tommy showed an unbelievable amount of trust in me. I played on the wing and I played up front. I played both positions. Yeah. But he showed like so much faith in me. Part of it was because we had a lot of injuries.
Yeah.
And he didn't have much choice. But at the same time, like, there was a spell at the beginning of the season where I should have been dropped. And we had options on the bench, and he just wouldn't drop me. He would just keep playing. He trusted me, just kept playing me. And eventually, again, 10 or 11 games into the season, I was on one goal. And from there, I just kicked on again. And I finished with 16 that year, 12 in the league.
Yeah, was the doubt creeping? Can I play at this level? This is a different level. I'm playing against guys like Lee Desmond, much more commonly. And,
That's a fair question. I remember vividly playing against Pats. It was the last game against the first series of games. So in Ireland, at that time, there were 12 teams. You play everybody 3 times. So 11 games into the season was at home to Pats. So Lee Desmond was there. Morgan Langley was on the team.
Right.
Another American. And I was playing on the wing, and I was terrible. We lost 4-1. Like, I was absolutely terrible. And yes, there was some doubt. I was like, part of it was like, am I playing on the wing too much? If I was playing up front, would I be doing better? There was a little bit of that, but it was also like, is this just too high of a level for me? And then the next week, again, I should have been dropped. We had enough options on the bench at that point in the season. I think most managers would have dropped me. But the next week we go away to Derry. We won 2-0. I scored the first goal on this, like, a sick header from, like, it was like almost past the penalty spot, like further than the penalty spot, like a really good header. The next week after that, we won 5-3 at home against Bows. I scored again. And then in the midweek, we had a cup game against Bows again, and I scored another header in extra time, like, to win 1-0. And it was like, from there, my form picked up. But, like, I can't thank Tommy enough for the faith he showed in me, because, part of it was I had a short preseason, and maybe that was a portion of the reason why I wasn't playing well, but a different manager would have dropped me. No doubt about it. And
but, like, when you say you were playing terrible, like, what were you doing that was so bad? Like, what were the things that, like,
Well, I wasn't scoring goals.
Right.
I wasn't creating a ton of chances. I was probably giving the ball away more than I should. Like, I would always work hard. But
okay.
But I just, in my mind, I felt like I was playing bad.
Okay.
Maybe you look back, it wasn't as bad as I remember it, but Probably not. But in my head, and we weren't winning either. Like, that first series of games, we probably only won like 2 out of 11, maybe, or 3 out of 11. So we weren't doing well. I was starting every game. I wasn't doing well.
All the time, right?
No, I think it was. I maybe played like 3 or 4 of those games up front.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, but then there was another like 5 or 6 that I played on the wing. So it was a combination of both.
And I think at the time also, just context as well, like, you didn't really have. I don't think you really had an out-and-out left winger, right? But then there was like you and Enda and Todd, and so there were like a couple of good center forwards, goal scoring center forwards, and I remember when I was over there, I got to see a couple of games, and I could see like Enda and I don't know if I saw Todd score, but I'm sure I saw some of the highlights, and I could see that, like, all 3 of you, especially Enda, had a pretty good track record at different times when when he was with certain clubs and but at the time he also scored a lot of goals that year too, right? And
he had 12
also
in the league.
Good with penalty kicks, so definitely and good for him that he kind of got back into it again this year. And he's been playing non-league, but then he went back this year and had a nice run, scored some goals for the club, and they made the playoffs again. Unlucky to move up, but I think they, after the start they had when Caulfield came in and and really picked it up, and so it just shows the quality that they're really. I always felt like from watching it that like scoring goals was never like an issue for you guys. Just creating them was like you had Ryan Connolly, but like you didn't, and Gary Shanahan was good on the wing, but like at the Premier level, like creating those chances, and then sometimes against a good team, defensively, you didn't have the goalkeeper. Tommy was always looking for like a really stud goalkeeper, and then and another like you didn't have Paddy Barrett, he had gone.
No, we had Sam OG, who was injured a lot. We had Kevin Garcia, who obviously has gone on to have a really good career, but Tommy didn't rate him at all. So we had Stephen Wallace playing center half.
Yeah.
We had Paul Sino playing center half, and he's a center midfielder. Like we just didn't have any real consistency in the team, and we had a lot of guys getting injured. There was a portion of the year where Ryan Connolly, I think he missed like a month as well, and he was our only creative option in midfield, like the only guy playing forward passes and connecting things. So
I think a lot of people probably on the outside would feel like around the team that year for 2015 were that there were a handful of good players, but overall a lot of the players were really Division I League Ireland players. Which may or may not be fair. I don't know. I don't know much. I'm not really, even if I saw the games, I'm not really at the level to be, judging that. But I think time has shown that, like Ryan Connolly got his chance with Shamrock Rovers, and it didn't work out for him. He might have been a guy though that may have been a Premier Division player, maybe with a different club, but a few, maybe a few of the others, but like. For the most part, a lot of the guys like Tommy was definitely looking for one or two more like really good quality players to put in that team.
Yeah, for sure. And I think and I think looking back on it, it makes it that much more impressive that we made the cup final, that we stayed up, that we in the end we had a pretty successful season, despite. Like there were points in the year where we had an injury crisis where we were playing like under 19 players that had never even really trained with us before.
Right.
So, Tommy deserves a lot of credit for kind of holding us together well enough that we stayed up, and we were penalties away from winning the first trophy since '96 for the club, which is obviously something looking back it's very disappointing. But my own role in it, and the whole thing was being that it was at home, it was a sellout, and I missed a penalty in the shootout.
Jane Keegan from New York, Galway's top scorer last season, top scorer this season, and a save by Conor O'Malley. And of all the people to be denied, it's the man whose goals have brought Galway United to this final.
Good save here by O'Malley. Gets the right way, gets two hands behind and pushes it around right goal.
Very good save.
It's a tough memory for sure. I think we did well to get there. I think we beat Dundalk in the semi-final on penalties, which they were the best team in Ireland at the time. And then we ended up losing to Pats in the final. So that's always it'll be a good memory, but also a very disappointing and like a what if type memory as I look back.
What were some of the more positive memories though from that year? Like any games stand out where like you just really were on fire and against a good team or anything like that?
Yeah, there were a bunch of games where I felt like I was doing really well, and two in particular was one away to Limerick. We won 4-2. It was at that point. It was we were both kind of towards the bottom of the table, so it was a relegation kind of 6-pointer, and it was away, and we won 4-2, and I had a hat trick. And then and that was one of those, and that was on the wing. And that was one of those games like I was just on. Like I was beating people 1v1, I'm getting in good areas, and then I obviously scored goals. And then I actually scored another hat trick later on in the season against Longford, playing as a striker this time. And we won that game. I believe it was 4-2 as well. I think it was 4-2. So like those two games, there were also games throughout the season where like I felt like I came up with a big goal late, like a Bose in the cup, or Drada, which was a relegation, kind of important game for relegation. When we were down a lot of players, I scored a goal and we ended up tying 1-1, which ended up being a really important point because Drada ended up getting relegated and we stayed up by like, I think it might have been on goal difference we stayed up. I'm trying to remember. I don't know. But
any performances against like with the Dog or who were really, really good that year, or Cork City, or like Shamrock Rovers or Pass, or any of the bigger clubs like that where even if you didn't score, just like really games that where you felt like you were in the zone and you just had a great game.
I mean, I scored against Pats and I scored against Dundalk in the FAI Cup that year, and we beat Dundalk in penalties in the EA Sports Cup. But the difference in level between those top 4 or 5 teams and us was so great that when we would play them, we would sit off so much and be in such a defensive shape that it was really difficult as an attacking player to have like an excellent standout game. I would say in the cup games against Dundalk, I think I played very well, but that was with limited kind of touches, limited chances in front of goal, limited involvement in terms of the attacking side of the game. I did a lot of defending, but I mean, that's why those are the teams that are making Europe, and we're towards the bottom of the table.
Yeah, like anything, any good memories of going to Tallaght and taking it to Shamrock Rovers or anything?
I wish I had one. No, I don't. We played 2 very shit games against them. I think we lost 3-0 and 2-0.
Yeah.
It was just at home we had better chances against those top teams. Yeah. Against Cork and Shamrock Rovers, I remember specifically like we easily could have won the games, and we gave up so many set piece goals that year. So those we did tie. We got a draw against Dundalk away, which is a really big accomplishment for a club like us. Yeah. I mean, this is when they're close. The following year they're in the Europa League group stages. Yeah. And we were at that time we needed a point to stay up, and we ended up getting we drew that one, and then we drew the Bray game after it, and then that led to us staying up. But
who's the best player you played against over there
in the league? Daryl Horgan, in my opinion. Yes, Daryl Horgan. Yeah. He was so good on the wing, and the balls he would whip in, and he would get the ball, and every time he'd just drive it at the fullback. He was a winger. Yeah. Or he is a winger. He has caps for Ireland and all that, and he was just relentless. Like a lot of times wingers nowadays, they want to kind of play backwards and keep possession of the ball. Every time he'd get it, he'd go at the fullback, and if you ask any fullback, that's the last thing they want. They want you to play. They want you to just keep possession because then their job is done. And he would not allow that to happen. At the time, Richie Towell was like the player of the year in the league. He scored a lot of goals. He's still over in England. I can't remember who else. I mean, Damien Duff was towards the end of his career. Got to play against him with Shamrock Rovers. That was pretty cool.
That's a big game.
Yeah. Against Liverpool, we played Trent Alexander-Arnold.
Wow.
He was on that Liverpool team that we beat 1-0, where Podge scored. I mean, there were just so many good players in the league. It's tough to remember them all. And even the ones in Ireland, there's so many players that have the ability, and it's just a matter of, do they want to fully commit to going and like living the proper lifestyle? Richie Towell was an example of someone who definitely did. Guys would make fun of him around the league, but he would take shirtless Instagram photos, and this guy would look like the Hulk. Yeah. And there was talk about his diet. It was literally just chicken, sweet potato, and broccoli for 6 meals a day. But yeah, I mean, there's so much talent in that league, and
you had like a Wes Houlihan like not at your time, but like
Yeah.
that's
Seamus
probably not too
Coleman
far.
played in the league, right?
Yeah, but
Seamus
like
Coleman?
it took him. From what I can recall, from what I've been told, like it took him a little while to kind of like get that gear, get into that next gear as far as like like he had the ability, but off the field lifestyle and kind of like what it took to be like a top professional. And then once he did, he was straight away over to England and playing at higher levels. So, yeah, it is a lot of really good football in that league. So and a lot of fun as we talked about in the episode with Vinny.
Yeah.
Which is in our archive for the Aristocrats soccer podcast. Listening, everybody go back into our archive and listen to that episode.
It's in the archives.
Vinny Parody retirement episode, everybody.
Check it out.
I think we should call it a day for part one. I think we've gotten up to a certain point. I think your career took off to a different direction when you moved on from Galway to FC Edmonton. But I think we should get into that for the next episode. And we've put 2 hours into this and covered quite a bit. And anything, in fairness though, I mean, I want to really go in depth. Anything that we're up to 2015 and with Galway here, anything we didn't touch on that you wanted to hit on before we wrap up?
It's a good question. The one thing that we didn't talk about that I'll just touch on quickly is the high school soccer experience.
Okay.
Just going back to that, I know I mentioned it in the episodes, and playing high school soccer was such a great experience for me. From a standpoint of like my school, we had a lot of fans. There was a lot of attention on the games, and it kind of, even though it was nowhere near the level, it kind of helped build me for the college level and the next and the professional level in a sense, because there was pressure on these games, especially when we played our main rivals. And I grew up with all the kids I played with, and we had a really good team, especially my senior year. And it's one of the we talk about the cup final. If I could pinpoint two kind of portions of my career that I'd want to redo again and try to win, one would be the cup final with Galway, and the other would be my senior year. We won sectionals, but then we lost in the Final Four for New York State Final Four. Right. And those are kind of the two moments that I look back on and I'm like, I really wish I could do again. But I think high school soccer is nothing like it was with academy and all that, because back when I was playing high school soccer, all the best players played high school soccer. Yeah. So it's a very different environment now, and it's a little sad just because of how fondly I look back at that time. But I think it's probably better for the development of the game as a whole that the best players are playing with the best players. But just from my perspective, I love playing for John Jay at that time.
Well, here's a question for you I have now. Like after doing this episode and then kind of keeping, for anybody who's really listening and following along with our podcast, or if you haven't, maybe to touch back on our first interview episode where we interviewed Matt Hedges. How would you compare, so you played against Matt Hedges in the PDL, and we're talking about a guy, all right, he wasn't the finished product at that point, but you mentioned at the time that, proper center back, you called him. And so how do you compare that to your experience playing against the Lee Desmond and Galway, which was a high level? So like, how would you rate them?
That's fair. I mean, Matt Hedges is definitely better. But it's very different. I think, I don't know. I think Matt Hedges has definitely played at a higher level. He was a better center back in terms of like defensively, but Lee Desmond can pick a pass far better, at least at the time I was playing, than Matt Hedges. So they're different players. And I think if you put Lee Desmond in Matt Hedges' position for a day, Lee Desmond could get by. I think Matt Hedges over the course of his career has been very consistent and is an excellent player and has played with the national team and has done all these different things. So he's definitely a better player overall. But I don't know, like what if I look at like maybe a Lee Desmond's not the example, but the following year, like when we went up against an Andy Boyle for Dundalk or a Gartland less so. Gartland's just a beast. He's not good with the ball, but like an Andy Boyle, someone like that, that is a more comparable, I think, level to a Matt Hedges.
Okay.
But I mean, Lee, I love Lee. I think he's a great player, but I think he's more of like a USL Championship. He'd do very well. But if you put him in MLS, he could play there. I don't think there's any question he could play there, but I don't think he would be defender of the year, captain, all those different things.
Yeah.
But it's a good question, though.
Yeah. So, I mean, it just, wrap things up. I mean, it just shows that also that, you as you develop, and as you went further along, you were playing against, in the PDL, you're playing against guys, like that had played at a high level, but you're also playing against guys that would go on to play at a high level. And then the same thing in Ireland as well. And so gradually, you're making those steps further along and wading deeper into the pool and seeing exactly what you are as a player and how you're developing. And then at the same time, you're kind of going against these or playing with, guys like Ryan Manning, who's very young when you played with them, but guys that will go on to do great things, or Damien Duff, who was
both sides.
the opposite, but still like extremely talented players. So really cool stuff, and like I think this is a great thing for folks listening out there, fans of the game and American soccer, and just sort of like the tales that a lot of the players go through, and especially guys from your era. Like we had the Paul Bravo era, we had Kevin Hartman's era, so like this is your era, Jake Keegan's era, but like got a lot of guys from your era, Leo Fernandez, like you mentioned, but there's other guys that had similar paths where back and forth to these really remote, odd parts of Europe, and then dealing with all these issues with citizenship and passports, visas, work permits, and then but like the lack of opportunity that would soon change quite a bit on this side of the fence, and we'll get into that in the next part of your saga when there was an NASL all of a sudden, and all their league had developed, and you went from going on tryouts to the Cosmos to playing against them. So we'll touch on that next time on the next episode of the Aristocrats Soccer Podcast, the elite soccer podcast and all soccer podcasting and podcasting in general.
Until next time, Dave. We'll see when we get this part 2 out. Who knows? Until next time, I'm the athlete.
I'm the advocate. And
we are the Aristocrats.